The topic that I felt Jesus wanted to share this morning was the topic of disappointment. Many of us have disappointment in our lives or things in our lives that ended in disappointment. And we're often left in the wreckage of that feeling or belief in our life that our life didn't end up the way we wanted it to, what we felt our prayers weren't answered, the way we had hoped. Life has hit us in all areas of our hearts, and it's left us questioning, where are you? In our circumstance, people came and told us, well-meaning people, and, words from the Lord and all kinds of things, and they were really, really great. But maybe those words didn't come to pass, or maybe the things that we saw in the realm that we live in today didn't happen. And you're left with, wow, that really hurt. And I do laugh and I do cry. So we can laugh and we can cry. So don't feel bad. But this is, we left that night 5 years ago, the hospital. We just left her there. Sorry, let me go back. She died in our arms, and we were worshiping and praying over her and singing. And I have to say, 3 years long of a leukemia journey was a pretty brutal one, as most of you walked through it with us. And the hope and the joy and the peace and the memories and the family time and the healing that happened during that time would never have happened without that. And we're expecting her to kind of go into the arms of Jesus for 3 days, and it was pretty challenging. And she finally takes her last breath. And sorry, my girls aren't here, but it was one of the most holiest moments I have ever experienced in my entire life. We want so much, all of us, to live on this earth for a long life, because it really is painful when people leave and they pass away, and it doesn't feel like their story is over. It feels like they have a lot more story to live out. But in that moment, Louis had a vision of these ginormous angels at the head of her bed. And he said, "Are you waiting for her?" And they said, "Yeah." And she takes her last breath, and it was that crossover between life and death. And it was so incredibly holy. And I could feel the holiness of God, the weight of Jesus being in that room, coming to take her, to heal her for eternity. Not heal her here the way we had wanted or hoped or thought. When I left her in the hospital, I remember looking through the window, and it was just like, what do I do now? She's gone. And, we just drove away. And so now it's been this journey of walking this out for the last 5 years, wondering what does this look like for our family? Who is Jesus in the middle of it? What does he say? What's his truth? And disappointment wants to come in. Disappointment wants to come and rob the joy of the memories of her life. Disappointment wants to come in and rob the truth of what Jesus says, that we will have hope and hope to the fullest, that we will have life and life to the fullest. And it got me thinking that, what is disappointment? Well, disappointment is a failure to fulfill expectations. We expected that Jesus wanted her to live here. We didn't expect that Jesus wasn't going to fulfill that. He wasn't going to fulfill that. He was going to allow her to live in heaven forever. In a lot of ways, she's a lot luckier than you and I. She doesn't have to deal with old age. She doesn't have to deal with peer pressure. She doesn't have to deal with loss, sadness, pain. She doesn't have to deal with the reckoning of her faith, the back and forth, the choosing life, choosing death, choosing life, choosing. She doesn't have to deal with any of that. She got out of jail free card. We didn't. We're all here, right? And we can either choose to have hope or disappointment in the middle of all of this. And then also disappointment means prevent hopes or expectations to be realized. And I just started thinking about the people in the Bible that had disappointment. And I thought of John the Baptist, and he's sent before Jesus. He's the one in the desert calling out, the voice in the wilderness crying out. He was the one that was going before Jesus to prepare a way. He was all in. He knew when he was in his mother's womb, he started leaping for joy when Mary came with Jesus in her womb, and John in his mother's womb started jumping for joy. And he knew. And then he's put in prison, and he's sitting there, and he's like, is what I did worth it? Is Jesus doing what I wanted, we expected him to do? Is the Messiah on the round? I mean, he knew he was his cousin. He had all kinds of ways of knowing. But disappointment, sitting there in that cell, rotting away, waiting to be killed for standing up for what was right, by the way, calling out an immoral king, okay? He's sitting there, and we're in Luke 7:18. John's disciples informed him of all the things going on with Jesus. So John called for 2 of his disciples and sent them to Jesus and asked, are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another? When the men came to Jesus, they said, John the Baptist has sent us to ask you, are you the one who is to come, or should we look for another? Even John the Baptist had disappointment and questioning coming in while he's sitting there waiting. Did I get it wrong? He's not really doing what I expected him to do. And John didn't even get to see what he had made his life about. He didn't even get to see the promise. But he had this moment of doubt. I can't imagine sitting in these prisons, waiting to be dead, waiting to die, be beheaded. And moments of weakness. So we have these things that happen. Disciples disappointed and scattered after Jesus is crucified. They watch him. He's been trying to tell them, like, listen, this is going to happen. I'm going to die. He's kind of speaking in parables a little bit, so it's a little bit over their head, but he is trying to tell them, like, listen, my day is coming. My life is going to be required of me, and you're going to have to know what you believe. You're going to have to know who I am. I'm standing in front of you. We're going to go to Matthew 7:27, 3-5. This is Judas. Judas was with him the whole time. He was with Jesus. He was one of the 12, and it's widely believed that Judas wasn't necessarily trying to betray Jesus for the sake of betraying Jesus. It is widely well known and believed that Judas was actually trying to start an uprising so that Jesus would then come if he could get him in the vice, if he could get him under pressure, Jesus would then come forth and showcase who he really is. Because I think Judas truly believed that Jesus was the Messiah, and he was trying to force God's hand. Doesn't really work out so well for Judas, but anyway. Then when Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that he had been condemned, he felt remorse and returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. Judas was disappointed with Jesus' lack of actions and then tried to force the hand, and it backfired in his face. How often do we allow disappointment and we force the hand of God or whatever it is because we're so frustrated with what has happened in our lives. We're so let down. We're so disappointed because he didn't do what we thought he was going to do, our interpretation of what he thought he was going to do. Judas had an interpretation of Jesus' words, and he got it wrong. Now, I will say this, he was chosen. This gets confused, but he was used to deliver the Savior into the hands to die. That did have to happen. There was use for his life, but what the disappointment caused him to do. And then it says that he took his life. He couldn't handle the disappointment of what he caused. So we've got a lot of different kinds of disappointment. Now we're going to go to John 20. The disciples watched Jesus be murdered. The mob and the crowds are getting louder and louder, and they saw them walking with them, and now Jesus is murdered. Now what do we do? Now, where do we go? Well, let's go back to what we've always known, right? Let's go back to believing what we've always believed. So verse 9 and 10, they didn't understand it all. So they went away to their own homes. And then down to 19. So when it was evening on that day of the first week, and when the doors were shut, when the disciples were, for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood in their midst and said to them, "Peace be with you." They were hiding. They were hiding away. Their disappointment didn't cause them into ministry right away. They were hiding. And it took an encounter with Jesus, making himself known, chasing after them, coming to find them, not walking through a door either, by the way. It says he just appeared. So it took more miraculous things for these guys to start getting the realization that actually what Jesus said was true. It just wasn't in the realm of their expectations or their interpretations of what was going to happen. And then we go to, so that was a few days later. And then we're going to go to verse 24 through 25. Then Thomas comes in because he's told of this encounter with Jesus. And he's like, 24 through 25, he says, "I am not believing it until I see it." Sorry if I didn't give it to you. Even though his friends were telling him, Jesus revealed himself to him. So disappointment is coming in and it is continuing. 8 days later, I did not know this, by the way. So Thomas was not there in the original Jesus revealing himself, and then 8 days later. So the other disciples were saying to him, "We have seen the Lord." And then Thomas says, "Unless I see his hands and the imprint of the nails, and put my finger into his place of his nail, and put my hand into his side, I won't believe." I'm not going to do it. And then 3 weeks later, I didn't know this either. This is shocking to me. Don't you think if you were hearing of the other 11 or so many of the disciples seeing Jesus, Mary seeing Jesus, they're saying he's alive, wouldn't you have done something about it? Like go find out if it's real or not? I mean, it wasn't like this humongous town. It wasn't ginormous where they weren't together all the time. Anyway, 3 weeks later, John 21. Jesus appeared. After these things, Jesus manifested himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, and he manifested himself in this way. Simon Peter and Thomas, called Didymus, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, and the 2 sons of Zebedee, and also 2 others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going to go fishing." They said to him, "We will come too." They went out and got in the boat, and then that night they caught nothing. But when the day was now breaking, Jesus stood on the beach, yet the disciples did not know it was Jesus. They still didn't know 3 weeks later that Jesus was talking to them on the beach. Why did they wait 3 weeks? So Jesus said to them, "Children, you do not have any fish. Do you not have any fish? You do not have any fish, do you?" They answered him, "No." And he said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat and you will find a catch." And so they cast it. And they still didn't catch that this was Jesus. This was the first encounter that Peter had with Jesus. And now they're not catching on that 3 years later, it's the exact same encounter he's using to remind them, "Hey, it's me." But, I probably wouldn't either. Maybe you wouldn't either. So they cast, and then they were not able to haul in because of the great number of fish. Therefore, that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." Duh. So when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he just heard the words. He didn't believe it yet, or he did believe, but he just heard it. He put his outer garment on and threw himself into the sea. It's kind of funny, he got dressed to go into the sea. But the other disciples came in a little boat, for they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards, dragging the net of fish. Then we'll stop there. So, like the disappointment that these guys are facing, they watched it happen. They said, all these things were going to happen. They believed it. And yet right before their eyes, Jesus is murdered. And what do we do now? We're just going to go back to our old life. How many of us have been so disappointed with Jesus' actions, lack of actions, our life, people's decisions, heck, even our decisions over our own life, where we've even become the disappointment? It's not a belief system. It's become your identity. Disappointment causes us to go back to what we already know or think we know, what's comfortable. And then we don't go forward, but there is hope. And we have to understand hope. The English word for hope is a verb and a noun, a feeling of expectation and desire for certain, right? I hope this is going to happen. I hope it's going to happen. And then a noun, you want something to happen or to be the cause. In Hebrew, it's the word yakal. So in the Old Testament, there's two words for hope. And it's yakal, which is to wait. Waiting or expectation. And kava, which means cord as well as tension. So there's tension in the waiting, which are two different words for hope in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, we find the word in Greek because most of the New Testament is written in Greek, except for the four Gospels. Most of the rest of it is written in Greek. And it means it's elpis. And it means expectation, trust, and confidence. So let's break this down. So yakal and kava is waiting in expectation. There's a tension in the waiting. We're waiting for something. In the New Testament, it's an expectation of trust and confidence in that. It's totally different than what we use hope to be. We use hope like, oh, I wish, I hope, and when it doesn't happen, we are what? Disappointed. So it's a feeling. In English, it's a feeling. And in the Greek, it's an expectation of trust and confidence. It's totally different. So we have to change our thinking of what hope is. The only thing that can come in and help us with disappointment is hope. But so many of us have hoped, in the English word, in what we have thought, wanted, or expected an outcome to be. In the New Testament, hope is a person. Hope is a person. Hope is not a verb. It's a noun. It's a person. Is God your hope? Or is it an expectation, or is hope an optimism thing? I'm just hoping. It's a good feeling. Send me some good vibes. Is it just an optimism thing, or is it something that we place our hope in Jesus and he becomes our hope? So we come home from the hospital. We're pretty numb, devastated, like this is not what we expected because we believed you were going to heal her. In my driveway, I've shared this before, but in my driveway, I'm like, I'm going to do the impossible. I hear the Lord say this loud and clear. I'm going to do the impossible. And I'm like, yes. She hadn't passed away yet. I apologize. I go back. Before she had passed away, we brought her home from the hospital and there was nothing else medical anybody could do. So he tells me I'm going to do the impossible. So my expectation of that is, yes, you're going to do it. No doctors, no medical system, nothing's going to get in the way. Nothing can take your glory from healing her. It's going to all be you, Jesus. And we're not going to be able to, argue anything. It's going to be you. And then she passes away 7 days later. And I was home like, what? How is this the impossible? And I start going, and I start like, I don't know. Like, you're just numb. You just like, how did I get that so wrong? What was going on? I'm so disappointed. I can't believe it. And starts attacking my faith. The enemy starts using it, going after God. Isn't the God who he says he is. You need to ask why. Why did this happen? Why didn't it come out the way that you wanted to? Are your prayers not good enough? Are the prayers that thousands of people around the world aren't good enough? Blah, 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 blah. Onslaught of the enemy's lies over our life forever. And then Jesus, with his infinite wisdom, says, you don't know what I meant by I'm going to do the impossible now. The impossible is what I'm going to do through you because of it. The impossible is that I made a way for her to be in heaven with me. The impossible is that I endured the cross to make a way for my angels and my presence to come take her to live with me forever. We don't have that perspective on this planet. We don't have the heavenly eyes and the perspective that he healed her. We don't get to physically see her anymore, but he healed her and he did the impossible. Before Jesus, it was not possible for our spirit and our souls to live with him forever. It was not possible. He made the impossible happen. So we have to change it to our hope is in Jesus. Now we're going to run through a bunch of scriptures about hope. You guys ready? It seems like it's cherry picking, but it's not. And I want you to think about this in the terms of hope is Jesus. It's a person. Okay. We're going to go to Romans 5, and we're going to start in 3. No, we're just going to read the whole thing. 2. I got that wrong. Romans 5, 2 through 5. Therefore, since we have been declared righteous by faith, we have peace with God. Is that right? No. I think I got the wrong. Okay. Through whom we have obtained our introduction by faith into the grace in which we stand, we exalt in hope the glory of God. Not only this, but we also exult in our tribulations, knowing that tribulations brings perseverance, and perseverance, proven character, and proven character, hope. And hope does not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured out within our hearts through the Holy Spirit who was given us. Jesus does not disappoint. And everything else that said about Jesus produces character. Jesus produces love. All of this is an end result for us to get closer to Jesus and to have hope. Romans 15:13. Now may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you believe in him, so that you may abound in hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Okay? Hope is a person, but it also in these sentences means the expectation. Where is it? Anyway, it's on the same page. Oh my gosh. The expectation and trust in Jesus, the confidence in Jesus. So we have to have the confidence in the God of hope. Not a feeling, but in the person of Jesus, the confidence that he is who he says he is, that we have an eternal hope that we get to look forward to. Ephesians 4:4. There is one body and one spirit, just as you two were called into the one hope of calling, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. We were called into one hope. One hope is Jesus. The only thing that matters is the hope in Jesus, that he would come into our disappointment, that he would become our hope above all things. And I'm going to leave with this last one. Hebrews 6:18 through 19. So that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we have taken refuge. I'm going to read it. Did I not give that to you? We have taken refuge. We who have taken refuge would have strong encouragement to take hold of the hope set before us. This hope we have as an anchor of the soul, a hope both sure and steadfast, and one which enters within the veil, where Jesus has entered as a forerunner before us, having become a high priest forever, according to the order of that guy. Yeah, I wasn't going to read that part. That tricked me. The hope that has gone before us to make a place beyond the veil. The veil is heaven. It's the end game for us if we choose Jesus. But I think some of us are really struggling right now. Because we have this disappointment in God. We have this disappointment in ourselves. We have this disappointment in our family. We have the disappointment of the choices we've made, of the beliefs we have about ourselves. And I also feel this. Some of you are warring within yourself because maybe you don't have as bad of a story as I do, so then you don't feel like you can get the healing of hope because your disappointment is, you're qualifying yourself or disqualifying yourself for the hope that Jesus wants to give you. And listen to me, the enemy will use whatever, whenever, however he wants to destroy you. Your story is not my story. Your pain is not my pain, but it is your pain. It is the pain that you have experienced, regardless if it's worse than mine or better than mine. It doesn't matter. But this is not a time to start disqualifying yourself and talking yourself out of the fact that you need hope. Because in your mind, well, it's not as bad as I haven't lost a daughter. Yeah, but maybe you're on the verge of losing your faith. Maybe your circumstances, maybe losing a daughter isn't in the cards for you, and that's okay. I hope not. I hope losing someone close to you is not in the cards. But if it were to happen, where would your faith be? Who would your hope be in? And then some of us have had such horrors happen to us and the abuses that have happened to us that we just can't get over the disappointment of that God didn't protect you. The lie is that God didn't protect you. And the truth is, that's just a lie. He wants to bring his truth to you to show you where he was and how he was there. And he loves you and the truth behind it. The enemy has fed us a bunch of lies, and our disappointment steals the hope, steals the truth of who Jesus was called and come to be and made known to be. Jesus went on that cross not for himself. Jesus went on that cross for you. Nobody murdered him. Judas was used as an instrument. Unfortunately, sometimes we're used as an instrument for destruction. But you know what? He did it before Jesus died, and Jesus went to hell and let him back in. I don't want that to be the case for us, where we just decide to be used as instruments of the enemy to destroy our lives and others. I want healing in my heart. I want hope to be the thing that I put as my foundation and I stand on. Jesus, you're my hope. But there's a lot of memories going on in the room right now. There's some people trying to shut down because the memories are too hard. The disappointment has become too great. But there is hope in the room today as well, and is the person of Jesus. And he wants to give you freedom, and he wants to set you free. Today is a day to be set free if you so choose. You can respond to the hope of Jesus Christ, and you can be on a journey that trade your disappointment for hope. Who wants to trade their disappointment, their sadness for hope? Some of you believe that you are the disappointment, that you are a disappointment. That has been spoken to you. You believe it. You've lived it. And every part of you your identity has aligned with the lie that you're a disappointment. Jesus wants to heal that today because that's not his truth for you. That is not his truth for you. You are not a disappointment. You might have fallen and tripped a couple times, but Jesus has hope for you. Jesus is the hope for you. Depending on your loss, your sadness, your abuse, whatever it may be. And this is a heavy hitter. Some of you choose to stay in disappointment because of the attention, because it's too hard to hope again. And you're never going to go anywhere if you just keep staying in that. I'm sorry, not. So let's pray. And I want you to honestly respond to the Holy Spirit today. Honestly, there's freedom right now in this room. It's the person of Jesus. The person of hope is here, and he is ready to set you free.
Thank you for watching the Father's House Oroville YouTube channel. But don't stop there. Please subscribe to our channel and help us spread the message of Jesus to all your friends and family by sharing our videos. You can also help support us financially by clicking the Give button. Thank you so much for watching. We hope to see you again soon.